Welcome to episode 272 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Mike Kravinsky, who just did a feature drama called Nothing to Do. We dig into this film and how he got it produced. We also talk about his background and how he got into screenwriting. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they are very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 272. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer-director Mike Kravinsky. Here is the interview. Welcome, Mike, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks so much for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Well, career for me. Filmmaking, writing, and directing are the second career for me. I spent 29 years working for ABC News in Washington, D.C. Through, as I say, for 29 years. And back in 2010, they were offering buyouts, and I just used that as an opportunity to try this second career. I always had wanted to make films. At ABC, I was a video editor and a technical director. And in the back of my mind, I had always thought work in film, but ABC turned out to be such a great place to work, great people, meeting interesting people, all of that stuff. And, so I stayed. But then when this opportunity came along, and I do call it an opportunity as a buyout for me, it basically gave me the seed money to experiment with this new career. And so basically I've been, learning and making films and writing since 2010.
Okay. And so what were some of those first steps? So you've got this buyout, you've got a little bit of seed money. What were some of the first steps to actually saying, okay, now I'm going to try and actually turn this into a career? Had you been writing screenplays sort of in your spare time? Were you literally starting at ground zero? Maybe you can kind of describe that transition a little bit.
Sure. I was actually starting at ground zero. I had done just in my spare time while I was at ABC, I used to just make these fun little videos, and this was pre YouTube, and so I would make these things at work, and then I would show them at parties and things like that. But I'd never really sat down and tried to figure out a screenplay, and doing something that is fictional from beginning to end, with using all of the the lessons learned about story arcs and all of that stuff. I started with in 2010. I did a small film called The Next Nick, which was a story about a guy who worked for 25 years at a company and then is let go, almost autobiographical, and his journey to find out what was next. And it was so basic, the story idea, the whole arc of the story, all of it was just really very simplistic. I got a few local actors who were willing to hold my hand and walk me through the process. And it actually turned out okay, but you can definitely tell it's a first effort. But from there, I realized, how much more complex and how difficult it is to write a story that's engaging, that has those little twists in it, that you start at point A and you end at point B, and how do you get there? And that was really the genesis of the whole process of learning to write a screenplay. I tell this story about how much I didn't know. I was shooting this film, The Next Nick, and it was the very first scene at the very first location. The very first time I was standing next to a director of photography, and we rolled to record, and the actor was across the street in a parking lot, and I yelled out, "Okay, go," and he just stood there. And the DP had to turn to me, and he goes, "Say action." And then all of a sudden I yelled action. All of a sudden the guy started walking. So, it's like, that's how little I knew. And but basically the next film after that, and then there was a short, and then the film after the feature after that. Each time, all of these films are very on the low end of ultra low budget. Each time I do it, I just learn a little bit more about the writing process and how to get actors to really understand what you're trying to say.
Mm-hmm. And for The Next Nick, was that self-funded, or did you go out and try and raise money?
No.
In the typical way,
that was self-funded, and it was like a no-budget film. I guess the best way to describe that. As I say, I had these actors. Oh, go ahead.
I'm curious, one of the big obstacles that I think many writers have is just having the confidence to go out and actually just, go and actually do it. And how did you have the confidence? Like, how were you confident? I mean, all these things you're describing are probably scaring people away, not even knowing when to yell action as the director. Obviously, that's embarrassing or whatever, but how do you get over those moments and just persevere and push through that hesitation that most of us feel?
I got to tell you, ignorance is wonderful. Ignorance is your friend. If you don't think, like in my case, I never thought anybody was going to make fun of me. I just thought that they were going to be nice. And for the most part, they were. There was, from time to time, there was, an occasional breath of exasperation with me, as I was learning. But, I think everybody has to go through it. I mean, nobody starts out knowing what to do. And, even if you have attended film school, or you take writing courses, or, no matter what you do, the first time you're working with a group of people, phrases are going to come up, situations are going to come up that you just didn't learn. And the only way you're going to learn is by doing. And, and that's basically what happened in my case.
Okay. I noticed, too, on IMDb, you did a short in 2016. What was sort of your motivation there? You'd already done 2 features. Why go back and do a short film?
Well, I will tell you this, is that, I was just discussing this with my wife the other day, is that, it's nice to do a feature and you have to work and stuff like that. But there is something really special about a short. And in this case, it's called I'm Your Server. It's a little comedy about, a server in a restaurant who just can't shut up, and it's just turning off all the patrons in the restaurant. But it ends up turning into a little love story. And actually, I was going to post it on the Nothing to Do Facebook page tomorrow, because Valentine's Day is coming up. I was going to just repost it. And, I don't know, there's something kind of neat about, shorts. Number one, you get to do what you love to do, which is making film. Really, the only downside to shorts is that they're not moneymakers. And but everything else is exactly the same. You're telling a story. Okay, it has a story arc, and instead of it being 90 minutes or 80 minutes or whatever, it's 10 minutes. But it's still, everything still holds true for all of the the points in a short film that holds true for a feature, which is you have to get from point A to point B. And in the case of I'm Your Server, we were actually reads for the film that's out now called Nothing to Do. And there is a character in the film called Nothing to Do that is a pizza guy. He's like a counter server at a pizza place. And he's exactly like the character in I'm Your Server. It's the same guy. He did the table read, and and table reads, people they haven't really shushed out their characters yet, and they don't really know. They're just sort of just reading, just to see what it sounds like. But this guy, Andrew Nichols, who plays the pizza guy in Nothing to Do, he had really thought about his character. And he came into that table read, and he did this most amazing character of this like oblivious guy who just opens his mouth and says stuff without really thinking it through. And when he finished his first bit in the table read, the entire group of people around that table that were doing the story, reading the screenplay, everybody applauded. And at that point, I said, you know what, we should do a short, just some little inexpensive short that kind of accentuates this amazing character you've developed. And so that's what we did. We went in, there was a local restaurant that let us shoot there, and we got some friends, and we did this whole bit. As I say, I'm a any way that I can save money, I'm saving money. And so it was very inexpensive to do. And then, but it turned out great. It was just a sweet little story that has moments in it touch on, the film Nothing to Do. There's characters in it that basically are explaining the story Nothing to Do. And originally, I wanted to use that as a pitch film, to try to get money for Nothing to Do. But it didn't work. It was too much of a comedy, and Nothing to Do was more a dramedy, and but it was still really an enjoyable process.
Yeah. Just one thing I want to just touch on just briefly is you mentioned that you found a local restaurant that was willing to let you shoot there. I'm assuming you didn't have to pay them since this was a super low budget short. And maybe you can just take us through, what does that process look like? Did you know someone that worked at the restaurant or owned the restaurant? How did you actually go up and pitch them? And what did you tell them to get them interested in being a part of this short film?
Well, actually, this is a local restaurateur. I'm in Arlington, Virginia, and just outside of Washington, D.C. And so there are a lot of small, mom and pop, nice restaurants in the area. And where you are, but when you go to a restaurant, they just see it. They don't want to charge you. They're not. Their first inclination is not to charge you. Their first inclination when you ask them if you could shoot there is, sure, you shoot there like early in the morning, and you be sure to put our name in the credits, and promote when you promote it, be sure to say the name of the restaurant, on the Facebook page or whatever. So, a lot of restaurants or a lot of locations are happy to let you shoot there free of charge. And that's generally been, I've been fortunate. It doesn't happen in every case. Like in the case of Nothing to Do, I had to shoot in a medical facility, and they're not going to. I had to pay, location fees. But for smaller places, in an area like this, where filmmaking isn't the main business. People are a little, they're much more, they're happier to say, okay, shoot in our place as long as you give us some promotion.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's dig into your new film, Nothing to Do. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch or logline. What is that film all about?
Well, let's see. The logline is, despite an overbearing sister, I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the logline. Despite an overbearing sister, a washed-up DJ, radio DJ, takes on the first real responsibility of his life, helping his father take his last great adventure. And basically, Nothing to Do is the story of a father who is at the end of his life and is in hospice, and has basically made his son, who was a very irresponsible guy in his 50s, the main guy to care for him. And, the idea being that, you think that the father is actually trying to give him one real responsible thing to do in his life, and that is caring for him at the end of his life. And then there's a sister who is much more, accomplished, much more tightly wound. And she just wants to send her father back to the hospital to get well, which is really an impossibility. And so basically the story is Nothing to Do is about families and how they deal with a very stressful and emotional time of a parent at the end of their life. And it's something that's very common. It's actually based on my experiences with my father. I cared for him at the end of his life in hospice. And, so a lot of what happened between the father and the son are fictionalized versions of what I went through with my father. And so it made the writing process, really easy, because I could just tap into my own emotions and my own feelings about that moment. And it seems that, we've shown at a number of festivals. We're now on Amazon, and we're about to be on iTunes. And when we go to festivals, it's invariably somebody or more than one person is going to come up to me or one of the actors, and they want to discuss what it was like being with their parent at the end of their lives. And it's really touching. We've had people, break down and cry, because it like a terribly negative, of course it's an emotional thing, and it's not in a terribly negative way. It's a reminder of what a special moment that was to be there and care for a parent, when everything is reversed. The parent isn't taking care of you anymore. You're taking care of the parent. And, so it's a lot of what Nothing to Do is based on all of these, my own personal experience, but also a lot of what I researched about the tensions within families during that time.
I gotcha. So let's talk about your writing process a little bit. Just a couple quick questions. Where do you typically write? Do you have a home office? Do you go to Starbucks and write at the local Starbucks? What does your just place look like when you're actually writing?
I've tried the coffee shops. We don't have we have a Starbucks, but I prefer not. I don't know why. Starbucks is too busy. It's too crazy. There's tried that, but for some reason, I don't know why. I don't need other people around when I'm working. I'm perfectly happy to sit at home and write. Every once in a while, I do need some people around me. But once I get into the zone of writing, and I'm one or like a scene or 5 scenes or whatever, and each one are depending on each other. I don't like to have a lot of distractions. And if you're at a public place, there's always something to look at. There's other, and they've all done a really good job of making this kind of nondescript music that plays. but I don't know why that bugs me, you know. And I just need silence, you know, and just to be with my thoughts and to write. And so that's the way I generally write. I start out, you know, with a, you know, before I even open up final draft, like I'll just stare at a wall, and I just imagine not every scene, but kind of the overall way the film is going to go. And then generally what I do is I just open up text edit, you know, and I just write, you know, 1 for scene 1, 2, 3, 4, and I just keep going down. And, you know, and it's never right. You know, it's never, once I'm done, you know, okay, this is going to go, this has to move up here, this, you know, but then once I've done that, once I've given myself, then I start with final draft and start doing.
How long does that process last? How long does that process last when you're just doing the outline and kind of just contemplating things?
Well, in the case of Nothing to Do, it was maybe 2 to 3 weeks of just a rough draft, a rough outline of what I wanted to do. And then I spent about a month. Now, I will tell you this, that I had come off of you know, I had come off of a previous film, and I was trying to write, and I was having a lot of false starts, and I couldn't figure out, you know, I couldn't think of what to do. I couldn't think of what to write. And my wife, who was also here with my dad at the end, and you know, she knows what a major thing it was for me, how I felt about it. And she just offhandedly goes, "Why don't you write about your dad?" All of a sudden, it just sort of like, that's it, right there. So after about a couple of weeks of kind of roughing out things on text edit, you know, I opened up final draft, and the first draft of the film, which was at 110 pages, I think, was done in a month after that. And then it took about a year and 24 drafts later before I was at the point where I was happy enough to start really showing it to people. And within that time, you know, I had worked with a screenplay doctor, you know, showing him the screenplay, and he gave me some suggestions and a lot of suggestions. And so I just worked within that. And, you know, I think the work paid off. We were a finalist at CineQuest, and an honorable mention at Tracking B in Los Angeles. Nice. Yeah, it was good. It worked out really well. And, you know, there was a little bit of interest from some literary producers for, you know, possible optioning, but it just didn't, how it goes. You know, you know, you think you got something, and then all of a sudden you don't get any calls anymore. So I just, whatever. But, you know, so I just said, you know, forget it. I'm gonna just do this as another ultra low budget film, and you know, and it worked out. It worked out great. You know, I mean, I think I would have liked to have had like a serious budget. I think it would have been great, but you know, I feel like it would have been like a long time to try to convince people, because there's like a lot of comedic moments in it. It's still about the death of a parent. And so I think it would be a real hard sell, you know, to a lot of people. And I could have been wrong about that, but it just seemed like at the time, you know, if I was going to move forward, I had to do it on my own.
Yeah. So what is your goal with these films? I mean, you just told us how, you know, people are touched by this movie. They're coming up to you after seeing, and in some cases crying. I mean, obviously that's reward in and of itself, but by the same token, are you doing these films thinking that maybe one day you'll get to write and direct a studio level film? What is sort of your ultimate goal with these micro budget films?
Well, actually, that's exactly it. My goal is that somebody gives me some money. I think, I'm sure that's the goal of every filmmaker, that somebody believes in you enough that they're going to give you like 7 figures of, to make a film, and you have a real crew and you have a real support system. That is certainly, my goal too. But, in the interim, the nice thing about technology today is that you can do these things yourself. And so that's where I'm at. And, I think I had mentioned earlier, I think Nothing to Do is probably the last one I do as a feature. I'll probably do short films because, they're really inexpensive, and, and you get to tell a story, and, if somebody sees it, then they say, oh, maybe let's see if he has a feature. But that being said, I am writing. I have a short that I've just about finished, and I have a feature that I'm still in the text edit mode, but it seems to be coming together. And who knows? I mean, if somebody sees, what I've done, in the ultra low budget range, maybe they'll look at it and say, let's give them a shot with a real budget. And so that's my goal. I'm sure I'm not I'm any different than anybody else who wants to do films. But it just seems to, at this point, seems to be working out for me.
Yeah, sure. So just to wrap up the interview, I'm curious, is there anything out that, whether it be on Netflix, Hulu, or in the theaters, anything out that you've seen recently that you thought was really great? And maybe we could just highlight that now for our listeners.
Well, I generally am a fan of the stories, the kind of heartfelt stories. Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird. I loved that film.
Okay.
A place that she understood. And so those are the kind of things that I really like. I loved Roma. I'm just like, it'll be interesting to see how it does in the Oscars. I'm trying to think of anything small. I haven't seen any kind of really small budget films recently that I could recommend. But I've seen, except for there's one that I haven't seen. I've seen all of the Academy Award nominees for Best Picture and Best Director. I'm hoping for Roma. I'm hoping Spike gets something. It just, we'll see. But that's what I say. My thing is that the small films that really tell a personal story. Even in a fantasy way, there's a film that was out several years ago called Whale Rider that I just loved. Because again, a small personal film. In this particular case, it was a fantasy. At the end, but you could tell it came from a place, that somebody wasn't just doing something, just didn't do a lot of research. It really meant something to them to write that screenplay.
Yeah. How can people see Nothing to Do? You mentioned that it was already out on Amazon, I think, and coming out on iTunes. Maybe you can just talk about the release schedule so people can find it and potentially watch it.
It's on Amazon now, on Amazon and Amazon Prime in the U.S. And then on March 15th, I believe, we are going to iTunes to the 60 U.S. territories, 60 English-speaking territories. and countries, and so hopefully, we get a bigger audience. Pay back that investment.
Yeah, perfect. What's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing, or potentially contact you? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing? I will round up.
The Facebook page, the nothing. What is it? Nothingtodo.com or your Nothing to Do movie, NTD movie, is a Facebook page, and then I have a Twitter account, and it's Nextnick Films. Mike Kravinsky and at Nextnick Films, and that's really all I do. A lot of people that I've worked with said, "Oh, you should be, on, Instagram and Snapchat." And it's like, there's it's. I mean, to me, it is such a time suck.
Yeah, there's never ending.
It is. It's such a time.
We can't be on all the platforms.
Right, exactly. I find that if somebody wants to find me, Nothing to Do on Facebook, and the Twitter page, they'll find me.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, Mike, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to talk to me. Fascinating interview, and I'm just a big proponent of just people going out there and just making stuff happen. So congratulations getting this film finished, and I look forward to talking to you in the future when you have your next film.
Oh, I appreciate it, and thanks so much for having me on, Ashley. This is really nice.
Hey, no problem at all. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Just a quick shout out to screenwriter Martin Bartlett. He found a director of photography for one of his screenplays through the SYS Select Screenplay database. And this cinematographer wants to direct the script. They're making some tweaks to the script, and then they're going to take the script out to his contacts. This is exactly the sort of relationship that you need to be building as a young screenwriter. Finding an experienced DP who wants to direct is exactly the sort of young, ambitious person who will champion a screenplay, that he gets interested in, and is usually very open to reading scripts from newer writers because he doesn't necessarily have access to the top agencies or the top screenwriters. This business really is all about relationships, and this is exactly how those relationships are built. I get emails all the time asking how many scripts have been optioned and sold through SYS Select, and while there have been numerous sales and options and paid writing assignments, of course, building relationships is really the key, because a relationship can span years and decades sides, whereas just one quick sale or option may or may not even really result in anything. Even if this film is produced, even if a film is produced, it doesn't always mean that it's going to help your career. You might make some money, you might have a credit, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate into more credits and more films unless you spend the time building those relationships. Those are really the key. Selling that first script, optioning that first script, again, it's really not about the sale or the option, it's about the relationship. And so I'm excited to hear about this from Martin, just seeing him build a relationship, having a DP in his corner, having someone who wants to direct. That's exactly what you want to do. You want to get as many of these sorts of relationships going as possible. And some of these people you're going to click with more than others. Some of the relationships are going to be, they're going to last for a little while and peter out. But the more networking you do, the more chances you're going to have of meeting that person that's going to ultimately help your career. And it's a double-edged sword too, or a two-way street, in the sense that, Martin builds a relationship with this guy and he might be able to help this guy do something down the road as well. Maybe as a DP, maybe Martin sells one of his scripts and he's able to get this cinematographer onto that project as a DP or something. So these relationships are two-way streets, and they should be looked at that way. It's not just about, hey, meeting people and trying to figure out what they can do to help you. It's about building a real relationship and maybe helping that person. And then just as your career progresses, you guys can help each other. But people are always asking, networking. Networking comes across as this sort of word, like you got to go to cocktail parties and like shake hands. And that's not always how networking works. It's not always what networking looks like. This is networking, especially with stuff like my email and fax blast, which I do, which goes out to thousands and thousands of producers and hundreds and hundreds of agents and managers. Again, it's not always just the quick sale or the quick option. It's about just finding that person that likes your writing. And I can't tell you how many times I've met somebody, they read one of my scripts, it's not quite a good fit for what they're doing right now, but sometimes you still are able to maintain that relationship. They're able to read some more of your scripts down the road. And that's really what you want to do. And again, if Martin has a good relationship with this guy, and from the email Martin sent me, it sounds like they do, working with him, tweaking the script, it sounded like Martin was quite enthusiastic about how that process was going. So hopefully these guys are clicking. And again, hopefully that will just be, another name that Martin has in his Rolodex of industry contacts. And, you keep up with these people. Maybe you try and have lunch, coffee if you're in town, if you guys are in a geographic area that's convenient to that, or just a phone call or an email every once in a while to kind of keep these relationships going. But that's really so key, and it's more important than just that option or that sale, because as I said, I've optioned and sold a lot of scripts over the years, and many of those things just they petered out. You option one script, and for whatever reason you don't necessarily click with the director or the producer, and so those relationships don't build. And then it becomes almost a waste of time if you're not looking to build those relationships, because you are always going to spend some time and energy getting that option contract done, doing the rewrites for the producer. And again, if you can build that relationship and make it a long-lasting relationship, you're just getting a lot more value out of what you're doing. All the stuff that you're going to have to do, there's a lot more value if you can really build these relationships. Anyways, congratulations to Martin, and thank you, Martin, for emailing me to tell me about this success story. I added a little blurb about it on the SYS success page if you want to learn a little bit more about the specifics on this, or if you just want to check out what other people are saying about the SYS Select services and hear some of those other success stories. Of course, there are many of those sale and options mentioned on the success story page, so if you are interested in learning more about that, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/success. Again, sellingyourscreenplay.com/success. I love hearing these success stories. Really does make me feel like the content and services that I'm offering are helping people, which is extremely gratifying. So if you have had some success with the SYS Select services, please do let me know, or even just some of my own free stuff. I send out my free guide, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. There's a whole how to sell your, that whole guide is about how to sell your script. So any successes, even if you're not a paid member of SYS Select, I love hearing them. I love hearing what other writers are doing to market their material and get their material optioned, sold, and ultimately produced. So please do email me if you have any sort of a success story. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing screenwriter John Fusco. John has a film out on Netflix right now called The Highwaymen, starring Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson. This is a script John wrote on spec many years ago. He came close to getting it produced numerous times, and finally he found a home for it on Netflix. John has written such films as Young Guns and Hidalgo, along with many other projects. He's originally from Maine, so like many of us, did not grow up in and around Hollywood, didn't know a lot of people in the film business, and he really had to kind of figure things out on his own. So he's got another good, inspiring story for a lot. I think a lot of people will really get some inspiration out of, and some just practical tips too, just hearing kind of how he was able to make it. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's the show. Thank you for listening.